All right, welcome to the October 17th Finance Committee meeting. We'll start by reviewing the September 19th meeting minutes. Any comment?
I like that I arrived at 7:02. I thought that was very precise of me.
That's good. All right, so they're precise. Any changes?
No,
All right, all in favor of accepting the September 19th meeting minutes?
you have to make a motion, right?
Motion to approve.
Second?
The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of accepting the September 19th meeting minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Right, unanimous. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to open a public hearing. So what the process tonight is, we're going to open a public hearing, we're going to talk about the warrant articles, then we'll close the public hearing, and then the Finance Committee will vote on the articles. All right, so can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so the public hearing is now open. So that brings us to the first article. And that's to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer for available funds in the treasury a sum of money to supplement various departmental appropriations for the fiscal year 2020 operating budget, or to take any action in relation.
Sure, so this is just that. It's a proposal to make some adjustments within the current year's operating budget for fiscal year 2020. The net result of all of these changes is an overall reduction in spending in the operating budget of $120,169. The largest decrease is a reduction in exempted tax levy related to the debt service costs that we originally anticipated in May, which is shown as a reduction in the total amount that will make a payment on the Beal Elementary School project. We carried an assumption into the annual town meeting of our former bond rating, and we were subsequently upgraded by 2 levels, and that yielded an overall savings over the 20-year term of the bond by almost $4 million, and allows us to reduce that area of the budget by $258,024. So there's several other moves and changes, and it's a little awkward to write the motion for this just because we're not used to doing a budget reduction and having to play within 2 separate parts of taxation, one being exempt and the other being non-exempt. So it does transfer some money in from the water enterprise based upon that borrowing. There's a transfer within the Public Buildings Department, and we, despite reducing, because we're, again, working within different pots of money that can only be used for certain purposes, we did have to provide a little supplement within the budget of $22,986 in free cash. You know, in the overall revenue scheme for the budget, the reason free cash is needed is because the estimates for our Schedule A receipts had to was impacted by a reduction related to the amount of ash revenue that we'll receive in fiscal year 20 because of an overage in FY19 that will spread out over the course of 2 fiscal years. So again, the net result is an overall reduction in spending of $120,000. And there's several changes, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions related thereto. I guess just one more thing I do want to point out. The largest increase within the budget is the town's match for adding 4 additional firefighters. So we were successful through the diligence of the fire department in receiving a SAFER grant, and that will enable us to hire 4 additional full-time firefighters. We intend to do that at or after November 1st of this year. So within the changes, there's $67,472 for costs related thereto, which includes wages, equipment, uniforms, radios, related gears, and some other ancillary expenses in onboarding those firefighters.
Thank you. Any questions?
I guess how long, is this a one-time grant, and then we have to pick up the cost afterwards?
So this
Or
is,
is this a multi-year grant?
it's a multi-year grant. It has declining federal contributions, so the federal government picks up 75% of the firefighters' costs for the first 2 years of the grant. The third year of the grant, they pick up 35% of the cost of the firefighters, and then in the fourth year, the town is responsible for 100% of those costs.
Mark?
Understanding that you're shifting it around in various pots, like the exempted and unexempted and such. Assuming that all of these articles are approved by town meeting, is there a net change in the standard tax levy, the non-exempted tax levy? Or is the only change in the exempted because of the Beal note reduction and such?
So we were able to anticipate a little bit more revenue in new growth, based upon what we expected in May. We had $800,000 in that budget, so it's not an impact on the tax rate, but the amount of taxes that we're raising. So we anticipated $800,000 for the annual town meeting in May, and we were able to push that up to $1,085,000 based upon calculations, or the work that we've done in the field, personal property and other aspects of new growth between those two dates.
So, if I may, so that extra $285,000 in new growth at the tax rate, so forth, now that's of course not part of the non-exempted, because that's new growth, but are we still keeping the amount that we are taxing at
That's
the
correct.
same amount?
Yeah, so we can't go above 2.5% year over year in the base levy, so we didn't do that.
Right, well, no, I'm, actually, it's kind of the other way around, if I may follow up on that. My concern is for next year's budget is gonna be, of course, no more than 2.5% greater than this year. So I'm always concerned about, well, what are we doing for this year? And I wanna make sure we're kind of still keeping at the rate that we could be at. So that way we still have the opportunity, whether we choose to seek it or not. I just wanna make sure we're not leaving something on the table when.
For fiscal year '20, this budget, we are raising to the limits of 2.5.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. That's, maybe that would have been a better way for me to ask it at the beginning. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, John?
Again, I guess if we read this, the non-exempt portion is gonna increase by about 76,000, which is 35 to 32 and then 9,000. And the exempt portion, in my mind, the exempt portion is always separate because we can change that number at will, I suppose, without relating to the 2.5.
Based upon our debt service.
So in a sense, the overall, the budget that we talked about during the budget season and at the town meeting, the 124 million or whatever the number was, has gone up by 76,000, I guess, based on this. The budget is increased.
Yeah, total, well, the non-exempt aspect of it,
Yes.
yes.
We're looking strictly at that.
Yep.
And then a second part of the question is, Article 5, we're moving 33,000 from free cash to the town manager's office. Why wouldn't that just be included in item 1?
It gives, since it's a one-time project, it keeps it out of the base operating budget and allows town meeting members to kind of vote on the merits of that project in and of itself. It's a separate standalone project. If it was the annual town meeting, we could have it as a separate appropriation, but I think this is the clearest way to do it at this point in the budget process.
Okay.
Thank you. First, Kevin, I'm always happy to vote on an article where we're spending $120,000 less than before, but if you could, on page 2, just talk about the revised payments on the water treatment plant construction and design fees,
Sure.
what those costs are.
Yeah, so we had placeholders in for those two items when we went to the annual town meeting, because part of that borrowing was what we did in July. And we missed the mark a little bit on that. So we're transferring revenue in from the Water Enterprise Fund, from the water rates to cover these costs. But the interest portions, what we estimated just weren't accurate, and so we've updated that now that those bonds have been issued.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? All right. Any questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, then let's move on to Article 2. The gist is of creating a town water system special purpose stabilization fund for the benefit of the Water System Enterprise Fund. Mr. Carr?
Sure, so this article, and I'll have Mr. Rowley and Mr. Howland join me for this in the next. So this article is doing just that, again, establishing a special purpose stabilization fund, and this is kind of consistent with the new approach to reserves that we've been discussing with the committee over the last, 24 months or so, and is consistent with the Board of Selectmen's financial policies, where it states that each individual utility shall maintain their own reserves, at least of 5% of their annual operating budget. It kind of segments everything out and makes sure if there's an issue within any utility that we don't have to draw down on the general tax levy to, make up for that if it's unforeseen. So this establishes that a stabilization account that can only be expended for the purposes or the benefit of the Water System Enterprise Fund. And we would, likely establish other similar stabilization funds for other utilities in the future when we have the opportunity to do so.
Any questions from the committee?
Is this, do we have money that's gonna be transferred immediately? Is-
In the next article, yep.
Yeah, all right, so that's part of the next article.
Yep.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, any questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, I guess we'll move on to Article 3, which is where we're going to transfer some money into the account, or at least we're going to discuss transferring money into the account.
Yeah. So Article 3, not in some ways. So Article 3 is a standard article that we've used to move funds that were generated through water revenues and turned back by the water department, and move them out of the free cash account where they ended up, and keep them with the operations of the water system. So, starting in fiscal year 20, we'll no longer have to do that because we have the enterprise fund that we established at the annual town meeting. So this is the last year that we'll have to do that. And this year, the amount is a little higher than normal, so if you just give me a second to explain that, and then we can get into some of the other details of the expenditures. So the total amount is $1,940,000. So the primary driver behind that number is over $1.3 million in revenues above what we originally estimated. So that original estimate was included for the fiscal year 2019 budget in May of 2018. After the annual town meeting, the Board of Selectmen, as the water commissioners, increased the water rate. But we did not adjust our anticipation of that revenue coming in. And we did that really for two reasons. One, that's how we did the entire analysis in setting the water rate. We plan to allow funds flow into free cash and then into the water system improvement account. And two, we didn't want to be overly aggressive with our estimates in case the customers of the water system changed their habits based upon the increase in the rate, because we had seen that in the past. That didn't happen, and water usage, whether that was because of additional users and some recent developments, and/or because habits didn't change much, we produced pretty much, or customers consumed about the same amount of water in fiscal year 19 as they did in fiscal year 18 under the old rate. So that again created a significant excess revenue, which if you go back to the water rate analysis, we plan to use over time to be able to set a multi-year rate and not have to, despite costs going up, we can establish one rate and allow it to work for us over several years. So accordingly, we transferred out the amount that we originally anticipated transferring out to the water system improvement account of $825,000. That's where we're proposing to move $825,000 of this 1.9. So again, if you go back to the water rates, that's pretty consistent with what we anticipated. Second, there is $250,000 proposed to be moved into that special purpose water stabilization account. The financial policy of the town is to have at least 5% in a special purpose stabilization account for each utility, and $250,000 is about 3.8% of the annual operating costs for the water system. And finally, there's $865,000 that's proposed for specific water quality improvements and initiatives. As everyone knows, we've had some challenges and announced a new challenge earlier today with the water system. So I will let DPW Director Howland and Superintendent Rowley talk about those with the committee, if they may.
Good evening, Jeff Howland, DPW Director, and I'd like to introduce Dan Rowley, who's our new Water and Sewer Superintendent, who took over for longstanding Superintendent Bob Dzeski. Dan used to work for the town, left, and decided it was greener pastures back here in Shrewsbury, so returned. So we are looking at this water quality improvement project. As you know, we do have issues now that the new water plant is online. We still are experiencing dirty water, manganese in the water. We have put out a bid to do unidirectional flushing, which we presented to the Board of Selectmen last week, if anybody got to see that. And there was a very good presentation, which we've also put online, to do the unidirectional flushing, which is different than what we have done in the past. It's expensive because it actually forces us to open and shut most of the valves in the town, which we have not done in a very long time. The cost of the unidirectional flushing during the first year or so, we estimate that 20% of our valves will have to be replaced, which is fairly expensive. So the first round, which basically does unidirectional flushing in our high pressure zone, which is the area, center of town, north, Browning, that area, which we have received most of the complaints on the dirty water appears to be in our high pressure zone. So we've been, over the last couple of years, we've actually plotted every single complaint that's come into the water department and plotted where those complaints are, and majority of those are in the high pressure zone. So we would do the unidirectional flushing in the high pressure zone first. We anticipate, we will be opening bids next Thursday for that. The other piece of water quality improvements, based upon what was sent out today as a press release, we have the PFAS in the water. So we have been in discussions with our consultant on doing pilot testing. So we're getting prices to do pilot testing for the PFAS removal, but also to continue on the hexavalent chromium issue that we've had over the last couple of years, and to continue that pilot testing, which we will be starting in the spring of this year.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Erin?
I was curious, when you do flushing like that, does the water that you flush out, does that count as a loss with revenue? Is it just outside the whole revenue and loss system, or is it, does that have any financial impact besides the cost of the equipment?
When you do any, whether it's regular flushing like we've been doing historically, or if it's unidirectional flushing, we account for that as part of our unaccounted for water, but it is water that's treated water that we've already treated. So we pump it out of the ground, we treat it at the plant, and then we flush the line. But we do clean the lines much better than the method that we have done in the past. We will use a lot of water, yes, but we do account for that, at least as part of our unaccounted for water.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the question I had is, we're moving 865 in for water quality improvement. Is there additional money already earmarked for water quality improvement, or is that the balance?
So we do have some other funds on hand that we have put in place previously, whether that's for technically new well installation and for piloting and removal of hexavalent chromium. We had $300,000 in place. So this will augment that. But, you know, as Jeff said, we're really looking to be aggressive with our approach in both removing the contaminants and getting the lines clear, since it's kind of really been a thorn in everyone's side, to say the least, over the last few years, or last year, since the plant came online and the water chemistry is now different, and we're not introducing manganese anymore, but we need to get it out of the mains, and the unidirectional flushing with the hydraulic analysis and systematic approach that we'll take, we're really hopeful that, or confident that this is going to rapidly improve, these areas. But eventually we'll get through the entire town. And we're gonna do as much as we can that weather permits this fall, and take opportunities throughout the winter, just like we did last year, whenever, it has to be above freezing for us to be able to handle this.
So you're opening bids on Thursday. I mean, obviously you don't know what's in the envelopes, but have you gotten some sort of idea to know if we're in the neighborhood with the money here we're talking about?
We did an engineering estimate,
Okay.
and we believe we are in the neighborhood. Obviously, bid opening is sealed until you open them, but based upon early discussions with several potential vendors, these numbers are reasonable.
Any other questions from the committee? Mark?
Thank you. I have a couple questions about how the free cash accounts are allocated, since this is taking some of that out of, if I understand right, taking it out of free cash, but this is money that was raised through water anyway, so it's, it's still keeping everything in the correct pot. What is the balance of free cash, and and do you have it apportioned by these different pots, for want of a better term?
So, it's a good question, I probably should have started there, but free cash was certified as of July 1st of this year, of $8,631,980. That's the largest total that we've ever had in free cash. We specifically track a couple of areas of free cash in larger buckets. Water, we really drill down into that historically and say, what from salaries, what from expenses, and then what from excess revenues, since it's general fund or Schedule A revenues. So we know that down to the dollar. The balance of free cash comes in from any other revenues that exceeded our expectations through Schedule A, and then any funds that were turned back from various operating departments that were budgeted or appropriated for but not expended for various reasons, whether bids came in lower than we anticipated or departments were able to find more valued approaches throughout the course of the year.
Okay, thank you. So in the past, we've always pretended like, by our rules and state law, that water was through the tax system, but, we created a fiction to make it separate. And then this year, through a lot of diligent work here at Town Hall in your office, we've created this separate structure to kind of separate that for real, not just on paper. Is that going to stay out? But I understand, I'm sorry, that free cash is a question that DOR wants to always know. So it always does have to go back in, or at least has to be considered. So is it going to continue to go into free cash just for the calculation? Or is it gonna stay out kind of going forward?
So annually, once you establish an enterprise account, it's a completely separate fund. And but DOR will look at that fund in and of itself, just like it looks at the rest of the general fund, and it will certify retained earnings, which is essentially the free cash of a utility or an enterprise.
Okay, and the other enterprise or enterprise-like funds, for, I don't know, sewer or whatever else we have. They're all done like that too.
Sewer's not. Stormwater and solid waste pay-as-you-throw are 53.5 enterprise funds. Sewer is a special revenue fund that was established in 1954, before enterprise funds, and we actually have local control over that. So the funds at the end of the year do not need certified by the state. But we also have a limitation that if we don't have funds on hand as of July 1, we can't spend funds in the ensuing fiscal year. So there's,
So again, we still have to calculate that in.
Yep.
And then the ratings agencies want to also see what cash is there too.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. You probably didn't think I was gonna get drilled down into that, but, that's always been something I've been interested in. Thank
John,
you.
did you have a question? No. Oh, I thought you did.
Judy,
Vikram?
just a quick question. The other two issues, the PFAS and the hexavalent chromium, are the estimates for addressing those issues included in this number
Yes, it is. For the piloting.
for the pilot?
Yes.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, any questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Article 4, which is related to counseling and education services. Mr. Mizikar?
thank you. So Article 4 does propose to allocate $35,500 from free cash for counseling and education services to family. This would augment and go to Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, augmenting the $100,000 that was originally put in place at the annual town meeting. And these funds would be used to conduct an outreach needs assessment that Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services would conduct for the town, mainly focusing on community outreach, but specifically elder outreach to augment or enhance how we provide services through and with the Council on Aging. And then the balance, $29,300, would be used to help Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services support an additional clinician within their organization to help meet the, what is now 6-month backlog of Shrewsbury residents requesting their services.
Any questions?
Just a comment on the description.
Yeah.
The total says 133,500. Is that a typo?
It is a typo.
Okay.
Yeah, it should say 135,500.
So,
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay,
well, I'm in John's old seat, so.
seeing none, any questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, we move on to Article 5, which is funds for the town manager's office. So, Mr. Mizikar?
So these funds are being requested, $33,000 to be transferred from free cash to conduct a survey of buildings and structures to determine historical significance, to determine their historical significance. I'm sure the committee will remember at one point leading up to the annual town meeting, there was a citizen's petition for a demolition delay bylaw, and that concept has been kicked around by the Historic District Commission and other interested parties over the past few years. And one of the sticking points that came up specifically in our discussion this past spring was, well, what is the inventory? What is considered significant and from a historical sense? And that wasn't very clear, and at the time, the Board of Selectmen and the committee came to somewhat of the commission came to somewhat of a meeting of the minds that, this would be a proper first step to develop an inventory before considering how to move forward with preservation of historic structures. So, this amount is based on conversations and quotes from historic preservation consulting firms to conduct an analysis of somewhere around 200 structures, which we believe fall into that timeframe, which is 100 years old or greater. So we would start from there and conduct the inventory and then be able to take appropriate steps thereafter.
Vikram?
Kevin, have we identified a consultant, or this is, will be a bit?
No, I've spoken with 3 or 4 different consulting firms to get this number, but we'll actually put it out to bid after the funds, if the funds are appropriated, will be limited to this amount. So if we can only do 190 structures, something that is one limitation, but rather confident from my conversations that this should be sufficient to meet our needs.
Any other comments? I guess the only comment that I have is that, I mean, I think it's nice to know, and I'm not against preserving history, but I am kind of saying, all right, well, we're gonna do an inventory, and then what? I'm always a little concerned about, you know, you have a nose of the camel in the tent, next thing you're gonna have a whole camel in your tent, so, I guess that bothers me. So what is the intent with the information that would be achieved?
It's, you know, it's not 100% clear, but the goal would be to analyze the options that are available to the town in order to preserve those. So one option would be a demolition delay bylaw. There have been other ideas presented by the Board of Selectmen on other ways to incentivize historic homeowners from not allowing their structures to be demolished. And then there are some other zoning considerations, land use restrictions that we may be able to place on lots that have historic homes that actually enable that structure to be preserved with the balance of a property to be developed. So there are a number of options, but, you know, the main focus would just be to get the lay of the land through this article.
Mark?
Yeah, I want to speak just to say that I think you identified my concern, that sometimes when we approve money for a study, whether it's for a school building or some other survey, it often, that becomes the process down the road. It takes a year, 2, 3 years before a final vote is taken, before the final action is done. And my concern, although I don't think it's gonna happen here, but I do wanna be on the record to say that my concern is that a year or 2 from now, I don't want the town to say, well, we approved this survey back in 2019. I don't want anyone to forget that, you know, everybody was gung-ho for it at that point. I think this is a good project. I think this is a well-written article, and I think these funds will be well spent. It's good because last year we didn't have all our information. And that's what this is. It's to get all that information. I just don't want it to have any other greater implication, should the Finance Committee support this, should the town meeting approve it, and should it go forward.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Article 6. See, transport network companies, Mr. Misakart?
Sure. So in 2016, an act was passed by the legislature, signed into law, that assesses a fee upon transportation network companies, most notable named companies being Uber and Lyft. That, you know, whenever a ride occurs, there's a 20% fee that's assessed, and that fee is broken up in 2 different ways. First, it's split in half, and half of it stays with the Commonwealth, and half of it is distributed to the cities and towns where the rides originate from. The Commonwealth's fee is broken up into several other parts, but, so we essentially get 10 cents per ride for every transportation network company ride like Uber and Lyft that originates in Shrewsbury. And in 2017 and 2018, there were 160,180 rides that originated in town. So we are limited in how we can use those funds, but those funds do need to be appropriated once they're transferred to us from the state. So this would appropriate those funds for the purposes of sidewalk, crosswalk, pedestrian mobility initiatives, and other initiatives that support alternative modes of transportation. And that's what those funds are limited to, so they would be used by the planning and highway, DPW departments to make improvements throughout the community.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Yeah.
Okay, Mark?
Does this have to go anywhere in specific, or can it just go to Jeff's department to fund, the current projects that are ongoing? As long as it meets these qualifications.
Yeah, it could be used, we don't have specific projects identified for. One of the things it can also be used for is complete street projects, which, we're considering at this time as well. But just appropriating it out, since it's limited in what it can be used for, and it's a rather small amount of money, we didn't identify any specific projects.
But this isn't like the highway funds that once a year we have to vote to accept, to take this pot of money and it goes to the highway department, but rather, this only goes to these specifically detailed ideas.
Yep.
What happens if we don't actually get those ideas? Is it a use it or lose it, or does it at least stay in that pot for some year or us to
Oh, yeah,
use?
it'll stay until we do use it appropriately, but we will have to do it annually, because we'll get an annual transfer as long as this act is in place.
Okay, so, you can't build a lot of crosswalks for $16,000, but, hey, it's something. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, seeing none, any questions or comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Article 7. Mr. Mizikar?
I'll have Assistant Manager Last take the next three articles.
Thank you. Bernie Cahill, Town Planner, will be presenting these articles at town meeting, but I'll take you through Articles 7, 8, and 9 as they're zoning related, and I can assure you that they are very mundane and cleanup zoning articles and hopefully not very complicated. And they all build upon work that we did at the annual May town meeting. Article 7 is to amend a section of the zoning bylaw that deals with the zoning board of appeals and who sits on the zoning board of appeals. As you may recall, in May, we took out a section that required the planning board chairman to be a member of the ZBA. So the members of the ZBA now are all appointed by the Board of Selectmen. However, at that time, we had missed a section that states, related to the appointment, that the chairman of the planning board shall be appointed annually instead of for 2 terms as the regular zoning board members are. So we're looking to take that out totally from this section, so there will be no reference to any planning board members in this section.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, any questions from the public? Okay, thank you. Article 8, Ms.
So,
Last.
Article 8 deals with the definition of floor area. As you may recall, at the May annual town meeting, we instituted a calculation for floor area ratio related to duplexes, that we are putting a restriction on the floor area ratio that you could have related to those structures. Throughout the course of the past 6 months, the building inspector and the town planner have been working with developers related to duplexes and floor area ratio, and we've determined that our definition of floor area, gross floor area, is not as clear as it could be related to that. So you'll see that in Article 8, we're proposing to delete the current definition of floor area, gross floor area, and insert a new definition that is much clearer, identifies certain areas of a structure that do and do not qualify for that calculation.
Thank you. Any questions, Mark?
Thank you. So this new definition, was this one that Patty and Bernie and the staff had worked out, or was this copied from other towns? Do we have any sense of what other municipalities are doing?
Sure, it was a combination of both things. It was Bernie and Patty, she and the building inspector, working with developers to understand what their questions were, but we always poll other communities with similar issues and similar definitions before we make any changes. So it was a combination of both.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, any questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to Article 9.
Sure, I'm just briefly just gonna back up to Article 7 and Article 8. Before you this evening on colored sheets of paper, you have letters from the planning board to Sandra Wright with their recommendations for each of the articles. The planning board voted to recommend Article 7 and recommend Article 8, and I'll go forward. They also voted to recommend Article 9, so I just wanted you to have that information for when you're voting your recommendations further on this evening.
Thank you.
Article 9, again, is a cleanup item. It deals with the terminology and the use of contractors' yards and storage yards. Currently, within the zoning definitions, we do not have a definition of contractors' yards or storage yards. However, we do have that terminology within the use table, and it's apparent that the use table actually has the definition of contractor's yard in there, so it's really not properly constructed. So Article 9 seeks to actually create a definition for contractor's yard, as you'll see under Section 1, and then it seeks to remove the entire language from the use table related to contractor's yard and strictly just put in contractor's yards or storage yards. There is no change in the zoning districts where this use is allowed in, so it's strictly wording specific.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, any questions from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 10, which is a general bylaw article. Mr. Misegar?
Yep, thank you. So Article 10 proposes to increase the maximum fine for any violation related to public health from $200 to $300. As the Board of Health was deliberating and setting their most recent set of regulations as it relates to flavored tobacco, it was determined through an analysis with other communities that most other communities were setting their fees at $300. In order to be consistent and both impactful as it relates to flavored tobaccos and other public health violations, we felt that it was prudent to increase it from $200 to $300.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? John?
As far as the increase goes, is that for, I'm not trying to ask the question, but is it for the fine? Or is that a daily fine until they fix the problem?
I think it's,
I know in some cases, fines are listed as daily.
I don't believe they're daily fines as it relates to the Board of Health, but it would be per written citation. I don't know how frequently they can cite a company. I can do some research into that and get you the answer. I'm just not exactly sure. But unlike zoning violations, which can incur daily costs, I don't believe public health fees are set up that way through our bylaw.
Any further questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, any questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, I guess, can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's closed unanimously. All right, so now we're gonna move on to, the portion where we are going to go back through the articles, and the committee will vote on those articles. So we'll begin with, Article 1.
Motion to approve Article 1.
Second.
Any discussion? No discussion? All in favor of Article 1?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes 9-0. 8-0, okay, thank you. So now Article 2,
Second.
any discussion? No discussion? All in favor of Article 2?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 8-0. All right, Article 3?
Motion to approve Article 3.
Thank you. It's been moved second. Any discussion? No discussion. So all in favor of Article 3?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes 8-0. So that takes us to Article 4.
Motion to approve Article 4.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Any discussion on Article 4? All right, all in favor of Article 4?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed to Article 4? Okay, none, so it passes 8-0. Okay, this takes us to Article 5.
Motion to approve Article 5.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I guess the only thing I want to say is that I want to say that, I definitely like town history, but without a plan as to where we plan to go with this, I'm sort of uncomfortable with investing in a study without knowing what the end game is and the potential financial impact or impact to homeowners. So that's kind of where I stand. Any further discussion? So, okay. All in favor of Article 5?
Aye.
All opposed to Article 5? Aye. So it goes 8-1.
7.
Or 7-1. I'm having a math challenge here tonight. All right, Article 6.
Motion to approve Article 6.
All right, any discussion? Okay, all in favor of Article 6?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it's 8-0. Okay. Article 7.
Motion to approve Article 7.
Any motion, all in favor, any discussion, first of all? It's been seconded, any discussion? Okay, all in favor of Article 7?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 8-0. Okay. Article 8.
Motion to approve Article 8.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of Article 8?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it's 8-0. Article 9.
Motion to approve Article 9.
So moved.
Okay. All right, Article 9 has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, no discussion. All in favor of Article 9?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's 8-0. All right, and then Article 10.
Motion to approve Article 10.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of Article 10?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes 8-0. All right. So that takes us down to agenda item number 5, the town manager's report. There are some reserve fund transfers. Mr. Mizuga?
So we are proposing the first reserve fund transfer of the fiscal year in the amount of $13,356. And this is a regular transfer that we do every few years, and it is being done for the benefit of the retirement fund, pension and annuities, and it is being made pursuant to PERAC, which is the state regulatory authority over pensions, in the amount that would have been contributed for the duration of military service for any deployed service members who are employees of the town, which we had one who was deployed during a portion of fiscal year 2018, but needs to be rectified at this point, as it comes due this fiscal year.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
I guess this is money we're paying that the individual would have contributed. So they get credit for the year of service working,
That is correct.
though they were not working. Okay.
That is correct.
that's fine.
Under, USERA, the federal laws required benefits to remain the same during their deployment.
Any further questions or comments from the committee? Okay,
Motion to approve.
Second.
all right, it's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. It's passed. All right, that takes us down to agenda item 6, which is to review the meeting schedule. So the special town meeting is on October 21st, and then continues on to the 23rd and the 24th if necessary. Then November 21 will be a finance committee meeting where we're going to, at that point, one of the focus items will be, it'll be after the Board of Selectmen have gone over their budget objectives. So that will be one thing that we can talk about. And then December 26th, finance committee meeting if necessary. And then January 16th is our budget workshop, where this is something that we added to the schedule. This is where we'll focus on the outline of the finance committee report. So what we'll do is we'll take last year's finance committee report, and we'll spend the bulk of that meeting reviewing it, making sure that the structure and sort of the way that we want to proceed is there. then we'll have the February 20th meeting, and then on March 19th, we'll have a second budget workshop. That's where we're going to, then, we'll have hopefully the budget detail that we will do close to final pass on the committee's report. Pretty much at that point, just plugging in final numbers. At least that's the intent. So any questions?
Yeah, just remind you, I won't be here November 21st. It's the night we have Dr. Pody coming back into town to talk about addiction, so
Okay, thank you.
just from a quorum perspective.
Okay.
Judy, question on the 16th. Can you just go over again what that's about? It's about the Finance Committee report?
Yeah, so at the,
What was that?
so at the beginning of the town meeting booklet, there's the Finance Committee report. So,
Okay. The
yes,
narrative?
yeah, the narrative, thank you.
Okay.
So we're gonna take that narrative from last year and pretty much go through it and say, is this the structure that we wanna go forward? We'll have that type of discussion, what kinds of changes do we wanna, have, there's a chance for this committee to put its imprint on that report,
Okay,
okay?
thanks.
Judy, how long is that meeting? Is it a half-day meeting? or-
No, these are your normal
normal.
Thursday night meetings.
Okay.
So I don't know how long it'll be, but depends on how prepared we are, I think. Okay,
Just to note, you're posted for 6:45 on the stage for Monday evening in case anything changes or any recommendations
thank you.
need to be changed.
John?
The December 26th meeting, I guess, that's the fourth Thursday. Should it be the 19th? If we're gonna meet?
Yeah, was there some reason why it was put on the 19th, on the 26th?
We'll double
And I
check.
would think if we're gonna
Good
meet,
question.
I'd rather meet the 19th than the day
Yeah,
after
same here.
Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Must have just been an error in how it was picked up when we did the agenda,
Alright.
so the 19th is the third Thursday.
Okay, the 19th. All right, great.
And can I just ask, when will we have the confirmed dates for March or February? Are we gonna have Saturday?
Yep, I can tell you those now.
That'd be great.
Dave can yell them out. So basically, let me look.
Kevin?
Yep.
That might be in their drive folder now with the amended budget schedule.
Oh, is it,
Yeah, but
are you talking about this budget schedule?
Yep.
Okay, so that's,
227, 229, and 39, no, 227, 229, and 37. Because the 27th, I guess, is a Thursday, and then the Saturday's the 29th, and then the 7th is a Saturday.
So, February 20th, 27th.
If you recall, last year, we started it on a Thursday to get rid of some of the
Yeah, it worked nicely.
mundane.
Yeah.
And then save the Saturday, hopefully.
So we do envision though having a meeting on February 20th and then another one the following week on the 27th? Because the 20th is school vacation week. I don't know if that impacts anyone, but.
I don't think we doubled up last year. Last year was the first year we did a Thursday, and we just, if I remember correctly, we just did it on Thursday.
It was on our regular Thursday, it wasn't a special, we didn't
Right.
add a Thursday.
We did not add a Thursday. It was part of the.
Can we move those together to the 20th? So that way we're only meeting one of those two, or just move it to the 27th.
Yeah.
So that way we're not doing during school break, for those of us who have that as an issue.
That'd be my preference.
so basically, the February 20th that's listed as item G would just be the 27th.
Yeah.
Okay. So the 20, is the
So we're
27th
deleting
then
the
is,
20th?
so the 27th is our regular cycle then? So the 20th would have been out of cycle anyways, right?
No, the 20th would be in cycle.
Oh,
but
the
it's
20th
school
would have been the
vacation.
regular,
cycle.
okay. Okay. All right, so
We
27th,
we would plan to start the budget hearings on the 27th,
okay,
the 29th, and then the 7th.
okay, all right, good. All right, very good. Any other questions, comments? Okay, and then let's move on to other business then, and one of those items is the pay-as-you-throw report that, was in our, it was sent to us. So at this point, I was kind of hoping that we could have a discussion, if people have had a chance to review it, and go over questions that you might have, comments, et cetera. So I'll start. I guess one of the things, first of all, I thought this was a good report. It was a long read, so it must have been a lot of work to put together. But I guess there are a couple things here that I was wondering about is that we do work off the premise of trying to hit 50% of the cost to recover that in bag fees or sticker fees. So I guess my question is, that's an overarching premise, and I don't know if that was, looked at if that's the right percentage. It just seemed that was a stated concept. And one of the concerns that I have is that, certainly I don't want to pay more for trash than I need to, but at the same time, I do feel that there's a lot of stress on our tax levy, and that, my personal feeling is that the tax levy could be used in probably more productive ways than to offset the cost of trash. So that was one of my concepts or questions that I had. And there's also the report focused a lot on looking at neighboring towns. And I guess my question was, I guess I had a question as, do we know where those towns are in their price cycle? For instance, if someone was to look at what Shrewsbury's trash bags are right now, we're discussing the potential of raising those fees. So that was one of the questions I have. Do we know?
Like when the last time they raised their
Yeah.
bag fees? I'm not sure, but that's something that we could amend the report or augment the report with if that's of interest.
And then I guess the other thing is, it's been 11 years, and this is the first time we're looking at raising the rate. And it did say that you're going to go another 5 years before we do another full, I guess, stakeholder analysis, which I agree. I don't think that needs to be done more often. But is there any premise in here of maybe looking at where our bag fees are maybe more frequently than that, maybe every 2 years, without an exhaustive analysis, but maybe a checkpoint? Because some of the concerns that we're hearing is that, people would prefer smaller increases over a larger increase, and I think we're probably facing a larger increase now because it has been 11 years. And so, again, it might be more palatable if we were to look at price increase, or just do a checkpoint on that for 2 years.
I can just comment that we have we've historically used 5-year contracts with our trash haulers, so we're very confident in our expenditure estimates for a 5-year period. So that's why any proposed analysis, I think, would be effective over a 5-year cycle.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable, because if you look at page 18, it basically it estimates the revenue for those 5 years. Obviously, it would be very easy to do a comparison in terms of how we offer in the revenue. It says $2,254,000, it comes in $2,220,000, that's one thing. If it comes into, if the cost comes into $2,008,000, then I'm sure they would decide to look at it. But as long as the stuff tracks both on the revenue side as well as the cost side, you got a baseline to look at. as long as the cost comes in, there's no need to revisit it, in my mind.
I guess, well, then I had a couple other questions. In reading it, it said in here that the small bag, holds 20 pounds. 15 pounds, and the large bag holds 20 pounds. At least it's been, at least from a volume of garbage standpoint, it seems to me like the small bags are like half the size of the large bags. Is that not true?
They're 20, they're built on gallon size, gallonage,
I guess gallons,
yeah,
not pounds, so.
20 and 32.
Can we go in?
Just,
That was an assumption, that was during the initial analysis, so the bags are not designed to hold more than 20 pounds at all. Conceivably, you can get about 20 pounds in both bags. If you look in that analysis, one of them was, it equals both bags holding 17, and then one bag holding 15, one bag holding 20, and that was just to get the cradle-to-grave price of the pay-as-you-throw bag, so that's an assumption.
Okay,
As Kevin indicated, the gallon sizes are different by about half, 16 versus 33, I believe. But that was just an assumption for the analysis.
okay. Oh, okay. So in practice, I guess I've noticed that, you can get twice as much in a large. So I was wondering, the prices aren't like half as much for the small and twice as much for the large. We seem to be not doing that. And in some ways, it makes it, the nice thing about having them priced in that manner is that, if you're bundling up your garbage and it doesn't fit in the, you can grab two smalls or you can grab a large, and there's no cost difference. So that was just one consideration from a practical use standpoint. And then I guess some other questions I had is that we talked about Stop and Shop last time, and where does garbage pickup come in to play for people like Stop and Shop, and where does that fit in?
Those are all privately contracted, so there's a very few, commercial entities that we pick up with or from through the pay-as-you-throw program. They're limited to 3 bags every pickup of the blue bags, but everyone else is required to contract with a private hauler and have their own waste disposed if you're a commercial entity.
Okay.
And as well as, multi-family condo, apartment complexes, things like that.
So why was Stop and Shop different?
So Stop and Shop, we were talking about revenues from the sale of the blue bags to customers.
Ah,
So they
okay.
were behind
Oh, okay.
in remitting the funds to us.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize, I thought you were picking up their trash. Okay, that makes, okay, all right, my mistake. All right, and then I guess the 1 week, it said in here that 1 week of tree pickup was included in our contract, but we actually fund an additional week?
Yeah, historically, there had been up to 4 weeks of holiday tree pickups, and it was a cost point through the new procurement process. And we didn't feel that it was fair, at least in the first year, to go from 4 to 1. But this year, we are going to go with 2 and see how successful that we are and time that right, not the week right after, probably the first 2 weeks in January. But we can revisit that year to year. We do have a cost per week of collection, which is a known that we can use in our assumptions.
And then I know that around the holidays, there's usually like 1 free bag. What's the cost of that?
It would just essentially, if you looked at it, it would be the difference in the revenue that we would earn from the sale of an individual bag, so, and then the cost of tipping the garbage that is used in a non-blue bag. Yeah, so I,
Has that cost ever been estimated, though?
not that I'm aware of.
Because that would be one thing it'd be interesting to take a look at what that's actually costing the town to give away that 1 free bag. So,
I would think if you get 10,000 households, it's a bag per household. and, somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000. Because the tipping, if they put it in a blue bag or a black bag, the tipping cost is the same. We're throwing away the same amount of trash. They're just getting it thrown away free.
Yeah, you're right.
And so probably $10,000 to $15,000.
All right. So I guess just in general, I felt like, I'd like to see it be a little bit more of an introspective look at what the costs are to the town and, the stresses that we have on our levy. And, also if you look at the different towns that, obviously it's good to do comparisons, but, they have different tax rates, different constraints on the levy. I just feel like we should take a look at a little bit more introspective of what we really should be charging. Certainly, we need to be mindful that we don't want to get near the cost of what it would be for a private hauler. But at the same time, again, the overarching premise I have is that, tax levy could have a lot more productive uses than trash is, again, that's my overarching premise. Any other? All right,
Yeah, I just have a comment on that. I think a lot of towns have done surveys on town services and what they value. And my understanding is from looking at some of these surveys, maybe Kevin comment on that, is that trash pickup is at or near the top of the
yeah, I
list.
did think we should have trash pickup, it just depends on how much should be covered by the levy is what I'm referring to. I'm not suggesting that we don't have trash pickup. All right, so anything else under other business? And then we have, takes us to correspondence. We had an email to the Finance Committee from State Representative Hannah Kane regarding the Student Opportunity Act dated September 19th. Email to the Finance Committee from the Assistant Town Manager, Kristen Lass, regarding 2019 classification and compensation report. Email to the Finance Committee from Principal Department Assistant Valerie Clemmer regarding October 21st, 2019 special town meeting. Email to the Finance Committee from Assistant to the Town Manager David Snowden regarding the draft pay-as-you-throw fee analysis. An email to the Finance Committee from Assistant to the Town Manager David C. Snowden regarding the updated fiscal '21 budget schedule. And email to the Finance Committee for John Burrell, First Billing Systems, so noted. Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.